performers have and filmmakers have all the time is that we could have all chosen a different medium to sort of work with. There's so many different ways to express our artistic freedom, and I'm curious what drew you both initially to working with film and being filmmakers. I know that's like a really broad question.
What drew me to? I think personally for me it was wanting to be in control. Well, originally I wanted to act, and I think that once I started to dive deeper into like acting and learning about how to maneuver it, I started to become very paranoid about being typecasted, and I didn't want to be like the black guy and follow the stereotypes of any black guy, or like the queer person and fall into those stereotypes. And so in order to avoid those, I thought, okay, well, maybe if I have control over the stories that I'm acting in, I can take out all the stereotypes, all the typecasting. And so I learned about directing and writing. And then once I started doing that, I became obsessed with that, dropped acting completely, and then just started falling in that route. And I think that that's kind of where it really started from, was just wanting to have control over the narratives that are out there, because I feel like there's a lot of, it's easy to like put people in a box, and I feel like there's a lot of nuances to certain demographics that aren't being told or represented. And I think that's mainly what pushed me towards it. It's just the idea of like wanting to tell more authentic stories than what I've been seeing over my years up until that point.
Yeah, being behind the camera is certainly a powerful feeling, and so especially when you're writing it onto the paper as well.
For me, I first I just fell in love with watching film. I remember when I was 12 years old, I was watching King Kong, the 2000. No, I don't want.
Everyone would
know
name
my
you
age.
watch.
But anyway, I was watching King Kong. I was 12 years old, and I fell in love with that film. And during high school, my cousin, who's actually 9 years older than me at that time, and he was obsessed with like taking pictures, and so he taught me everything about like how to use a camera. And when I was 16 years old, one day I just wrote a script, and my mom encouraged me to make a film about it, and that was my first short film. When I was like second year of high school. It was really bad. And I acted in it because I couldn't find anyone to do it, so I did it myself. Yeah, I think since then I was just just found that filmmaking is my thing, and I think because I cannot paint, I'm not a poet. I think this is the art form I found I can express myself, and yeah, so.
Well, that's like a perfect answer. After this, I'm going to ask you which King Kong you're talking about. But that speaks perfectly to my next question, because short filmmaking specifically is often independently driven, but that also means the financing, right, is independently driven, and there's so many separate challenges that come with kind of creating your own autonomy, which is a really powerful thing. So I'm curious, and I'm sure the producers can also speak to this, is what sort of challenges did you face in the process of getting your films made?
I think.
I feel like none.
well,
Not one.
Honestly, I kind of want to say, yeah, there weren't any, just because I funded the entire thing myself, and I knew exactly where the money was coming from, and I knew what I was using it for. And this is my second short film. So I did the same thing with my first one, where I saved up all my money for months and months to the amount that I thought I needed. And then so going into the second one, I knew that, okay, well, this worked the first time, let's do it again. So once again, I was fortunate enough to have the income to save enough money to do it again, and I had an amazing producer this time who knew what to do with it and how to like manage it. So I mean, it kind of sounds like kind of shitty, but it wasn't really that difficult, because it's just like I knew where the money was coming from. I didn't have to worry about like searching or asking people or borrowing, which is kind of why I wanted to pay for it myself, is because I didn't want to do all that. I didn't want to have the fate of my work be in someone else's hands, and if something fell through, now I can't create what I wanted to create. So I am very proud that I did that. I'm happy that I did that, and I don't feel like I wasted a penny just because it's my responsibility. So it all came from me. So it was pretty easy to if I needed more, and I knew I have to work a few months more to get however much. And post production was separate because of that. I saved up for first, and then I took a break before post production, saved up again, and then paid for that. So it all kind of was, I'm not gonna say organized, but it was.
No, things very organized.
Oh,
you
is
work,
it? Was it?
I feel like you work very well under pressure.
I guess so, but yeah, so that was my experience with it.
For me, yes, definitely time and money and casting. So it was this film was my USC thesis film. So before that, the biggest budget I've worked on is like $2,000. Or my first short film at USC, we're only allowed to shoot under like $500. So, but this one's like the biggest budget I've worked on so far. It cost us like $25,000. Wow. So from like 2,000 to 25,000. But of course, I didn't have all the money, so we did crowdfunding.
You also, just to clarify, you don't have to tell me if you want to tell me about the financing. You very much can. But I'm curious, because as a student project, were there any challenges that you could speak to that sort of served a greater purpose? I mean, if it was the money, which it usually is.
Yeah, I would say casting.
Okay.
Because this is if I were shooting China, I think it would be much easier. But here, first I couldn't find so many actors who can speak Mandarin and who are at that age who are willing to do such sexually explicit scenes like masturbation and dealing with a subject like this. Not many people are willing to do that. So we've had a very hard time finding the main actor who's playing Juan. We actually first landed an actor, and I had a great conversation with him, and he told me about when he was young. He had like a secret love with some guy. That was a beautiful story, and I casted him. However, one day I think his wife found out he's in my film.
Oh no!
I think his wife was just had a peek at our script or something, and she's like, "Oh, you cannot be in this film. It's to a degree that you're gonna start a fight." And so the guy quit. So then we were like maybe 2-3 weeks away from our principal photography. But luckily we found a casting director, and she found us maybe 3 options, but two of them couldn't really speak Mandarin. So now we only have 1 option, and that's the guy.
That's exactly the story that I wanted to hear. The homophobic wife always.
Oh my god.
But that leads me to my next question, which is how did you come to this story? This is and I want to start with you because you sort of already started on this track. Is how did the story come to you, or did you come to the story? Why did you choose for it to be explicit in the ways that you chose it to be? I mean, applause to you for that, but I'm just curious.
I think so. I actually wrote this script in 2019, 3 years ago, and I had for a long time I've been telling stories about women and female, but also at the same time I like to tell stories about the elderly people, like my grandpa's age. So I think the story, the inspiration is coming from one day I have a relative passed away, and he just passed away on like a very random day. She just like gone, like with no sign, or he was not even sick. Just that day he passed away, and he was my grandpa's younger brother, and my grandpa passed away way before I was born, so I kind of look up to him as my grandpa. So I was just wondering, like, oh, what if life is so short? Like, what if people have been really done what they really want to do their whole life? So then I want to write a story about like elderly people start to self-acceptance, and like a story about the elderly people find something they've been suppressed their whole life, and finally willing to try something new. So that's the story I want to write about, and I don't just want it to be an LGBTQ story. I think it's a universal story about self-acceptance, about and why it's so sexually explicit. I think I want to try to be authentic, and I think the elderly
turns out people have
people.
What? It turns out people have sex.
The elderly people tend to be desexualized by media, so I think just want to show that they have desire.
And you did it beautifully. I just want to say, like, you granted, you're right, because I think with ageism, so many of these stories get lost, and you've granted so much power to, as you said, like the elderly, and there's so much love in the way that you made the film, and that's why I asked about the sexuality of it, because you're right, like it's not something that we're often seeing, and it's something that we should be seeing, because it's not like it just disappears. But LaQuan, I'm curious how you came to your story.
I think I wanted to tell a story about. I wanted to tell it. I don't remember where it came from.
Just my brain.
well, it was this idea of, and when I say it, it sounds very complicated, but I think I showed it better than what I'm about to say. But it's just the idea of like, what happens if you fall in love with someone and you have this relationship and it's the best thing in the world and you are so in love and it lasts, and for one reason or another, it ends and you're no longer together. So then you move on, you find someone new, you fall in love with that person, you have a whole new experience, all new memories, and you're not quite yet over the last person. So it's kind of the situation of like, what happens when you're in this new relationship? The person that you did have such strong feelings for in the past comes back around. Do you want to give another chance to the person who you really feel like meant a lot to you and was like your true love, or do you want to give it to this current partner? And I thought that would be like a very interesting story of like, well, do you choose your current love or the love that you felt like was it? And I mean, we don't really get an answer, but I think that like it really just came from like aching for someone who you like, wanting someone who isn't around, and just the opportunity to give it back. How does that pan out? And I think that's mainly where it comes from. It's one big what if. I've never sort of that's where my mind went when I was writing it.
You did a very good job explaining that, so I don't want you to discredit yourself for you explained that perfectly, and I think that's an amazing reason to make a film and an amazing way to write a script, because but I also appreciate that you don't give us an answer. I find that from a programmer's perspective, but also from an audience perspective, like the movies that spell things out for me are often the ones that I forget about. The ones that make me answer my own questions are the ones that stay with me for, 20, 30 years. So exactly, I think, and in real life, sometimes you just don't know how to make you don't know the answer. And this sort of takes me to my next question, which is, as queer filmmakers, but I think generally as filmmakers, we often draw inspiration from people that came before us, whether that be artists or literally people like you mentioned, your grandfather. But I'm specifically curious about the artistic perspective. Who do you both draw from for inspiration artistically?
As far as filmmakers go, filmmakers, not too many people because it's also another shitty thing to say, but like I'm not like super, like I'm not like a film person who's like super into it and watch all these movies and all these directors. So I don't really have someone specifically that I like look up to or look for or like am following as much. I kind of get inspiration just from like people around me and like my life, my friends' lives, like the stories I hear around. Honestly, a lot of music, like lyrics, I'll listen to, or even like just like instrumentally, like I'll hear something and it'll make me think of like emotion, or like I'll attach a visual to a sound bite or something. And a lot of my inspiration when I'm writing or coming up with an idea for a film comes from music and the people around me, not so much other films or filmmakers. I think that I'm starting to kind of get more of a grasp of it and like, okay, maybe I should start like looking at directors and see what they're doing and see what I like and all of that. But I think that originally just my inspiration and everything that I draw from is all emotional and it's all from like this story is like this one what if that I had with my first film. That one was based off of emotions I had about someone else, and I think that to me feels more authentic than like looking at someone else or being inspired by someone else, because I think that it gives me the chance to just make something that's purely me and is not influenced by another creator, which is not bad if you do that. Like I want to be that person. I want to have more like detailed references, but I think as of right now, it seems to be working for me to just take inspiration and ideas and everything I can from real life. And yeah, that's.
I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to be an artist. So
Yes.
my question wasn't leading to, you have to tell me for $1, name a filmmaker. No. That's a beautiful answer. And yeah, I appreciate your style of filmmaking. I think that's just as powerful as the person, for example, who's inspired by X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Oh, for me, I think there are so many filmmakers influenced me, but for queer films specifically, I think one of my favorite films is Brokeback Mountain by An Lee, the 2005 film. I actually wrote a paper about it when I was in college, and I remember every time I watched that film, I just cry so badly. I think it's the film that really helped me understand the gay love and what it means to be gay, and that's the film really teaches me that love transcends all. So I would say, and actually, An Lee himself is a straight man. He's not a gay man, but he made such wonderful film about. So, yeah, I think this film definitely influenced me a lot. And for the style of my film, like this film, I would say I drew a lot of inspiration from Happy Together by Wong Kar-wai.
I saw that.
Even though I don't really like Wong Kar-wai that much, but I like that film. Yeah,
it's a good film. That's perfect. I want to end on a happy note because I got my cue. We have 5 more minutes left. But I always like to end on a fun note. It's as queer filmmakers and as BIPOC filmmakers, the industry is not set up for us. So I'm curious what your filmmaking utopia looks like, if you have one.
I am working towards that, and I feel like that's my aim is to create something that's more universal for all the viewers, regardless of your demographic, if your sexuality or ethnicity. I think that to me, it's important to showcase the small details about demographics that aren't overlooked. And this is something that I have talked about and I preached about for the longest time. Is I want to see more authentic representation for queer people, for people of color. I think that there's so many stories out there that could be told that people don't know of. I think that there's a lot of groups of people who are overlooked, like Black lesbians. Like I feel like you don't see many. Well, lesbians first off, and then Black lesbians.
You're telling me.
It's like it's just there's no representation. If there is, that representation is rooted in being over dramatic or being super sexual, because that's how we look at these people. I think that, with my first film, it was about a transmasculine person, and I feel like, there is a lot of representation with trans women, but I feel like trans men or non-binary transmasculine people, I feel like are overlooked a bit as well. And I think that there's so many details in their experience in their day-to-day life that can make a good story and that can really showcase proper entertainment that's emotional or funny or can be haunting. And so for me, I think ideally I would want to just push forward with narratives that showcase a variety of people and not just the specifics that we've been used to watching for however many years. I think it's quite boring now, and I think that, seeing what comes out of, honestly, queer people have a lot of trauma that we can draw from, and I don't think that cis hetero people can really grab what we need from these experiences. I think that only queer people can tell their stories and reflect on what they've been through, and for example, and I'll stop. But for example, my next short film that I finished writing is about someone who has HIV, and I feel like we have HIV representation, but I feel like all the HIV representation follows either you're dying in the end, or it only takes place in the 80s, or you're you're ashamed of it, and all these things. But I feel like, where is the representation of it from someone who has HIV? What about the person who has it, what they're experiencing? And what if the person who has HIV isn't, ashamed of it? What if they're okay with it and it's just part of their identity? I feel like we're in 2023 now, PrEP exists, Biktarvy and all the medication that you can take to help to treat HIV is out there. So why are we still telling stories that take place at a time that's no longer relevant? Not relevant, but present, I think that I just want to see more art that represents current day authentic stories by people who are experiencing it. I'm tired of watching things that have been made from the perspective of someone who's not that community. So that's all I have to say.
Are you Sophia?
I love your answer. I guess, I think, just what you said, more untold stories on screen. I also realized that not many queer film or films about LGBTQ plus are even are showing in the theater, or sponsored by big studios. I think I just watched. There's a film called Bros.
Yeah.
It was. I think it's bad. I think it's really. I don't like it, and I think it's one. I think it's one of the first films sponsored by a big studio. And I wish to see more film like that. I wish queer film can get more budget, more sponsorship from even big studios. Not just Bros, but we can see more films. And also, I think there are so many stories. We're tired to see the stereotypes. I was actually just in London last week at BFI Flair, and I met some very interesting people there, and they were film about intersex, and I think I haven't really seen much film about that subject. I think just more untold stories.
Oh, that's perfect. And that's a really good note to end on. Untold stories. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for being here as well. I hope to see your faces soon. We still have a week more of programming and workshops, so come on through.